Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Property Finance Podcast. And I want to talk about a question that I get asked quite a bit, which is what would you do if you had 50 grand in your pocket right now in property? And it's a really tough one because whenever anyone asks that, I mean, it changes day by day. I mean, if you ask me this question tomorrow, I'll probably think of three different answers. But I've sort of come up with three initial answers. So for those of you that are getting started and maybe have got a 50 grand pot, I mean, to be fair, this would work with 10 or 20 grand as well. But I think there's so much on social media and everything else about you need hundreds of thousands of pounds to get started in property. You need all of this to get started. And I think it kind of goes two ways. You've either got the stuff on social media that says you need hundreds of thousands of pounds, or you've got the stuff on social media that says you can do it with zero. I kind of want to sit in the middle and be like, well, actually, if I had a pot of savings, so 25, 30 grand, what would I do with that money? And like I said, I've got three. So the first one is I'd do a joint venture. So I'd look to joint venture with a landowner, or I'd look to joint venture with maybe someone on an assisted sale or something like that. So I would do something whereby I'm not spending huge amounts of capital up front. I'm minimizing my risk, because I sort of looked at this one and I thought, well, what if I did, for example, a planning uplift deal or a planning gain deal, whatever you want to call it. So what if I went and got an option agreement on a plot of land, and I then went and got planning and then sold that property on for a massive profit? But I thought to myself, well, actually, we've got to balance some of the risk here, because if I go and put 25 grand in on planning and that planning fails, I've lost 25 grand. It's just gone. There's no way of getting that money back. It's an option agreement. I don't own the land. I can't go and then sell the land or anything like that. I've completely scuppered it. I've lost everything. So I'm trying to think of ways of securing that money as well. So that's why my first idea was a joint venture with a landowner or a property owner. So I would either do a joint venture with a landowner where I become the developer, they become the joint venture partner, they put the land into the SPV potentially, and we work together to finance through that deal. And that 25 grand or 50 grand, however much I've got, would go on professional fees, getting the build started and everything else. And I would structure it in such a way that I took ownership of that land from day one as well. So whether it be 50% or however I structured it with the vendor, but I've got a percentage ownership from day one. So my money going in, I know that's secure. If I did an assisted sale, I would go slightly differently in that I wouldn't have an ownership stake in that property, but I would tie them up in legal contracts to make sure that my money was protected. So if I found someone who was trying to sell a property, they were struggling to sell it for whatever reason, and I could go and spend 25 grand doing a bit of a refurb and getting it to a point where that property was then worth considerably more and would obviously sell quicker. So yeah, I'd just tie them up in legal contracts and then I know that money is secure and safe. The second idea that I had was kind of based on a lot of the guys up around Newcastle, Durham, etc., who are purchasing sort of low-end stock in terms of price, not quality. But they're purchasing houses at maybe 60, 70 grand, and they're just nice little investments, decent yields. Obviously, I don't know that area particularly well. I've never been around there. But I would find a good property sourcer and I would put 50 grand in to buy maybe two of these properties. And what I would try and do is find a property sourcer who's good at BRR, so buy, refurbish, refinance. And then what I would do is I would say, look, I've got 50 grand. Can we use that with a combination of bridging finance? Can we go and purchase a couple of properties, refurb them, refinance as much of that 50 grand as we can, back out, and then go again? And what I would try and do is, in my own mind, I know I'm not going to get that 50 grand all back out. I know I'm going to have to leave some of that back in there. So I think realistically that could probably stretch to 3 or 4 property investments, which for me, I mean, if I can put 50 grand in and get 4 or 5 of these small properties in Newcastle back, they're probably all cash flowing $250 a month. I know I'm going to be making £1,000 a month potentially off of these properties. So that for me, I look at that and I think that's a decent investment. So it works out about 12 grand a year. So I'm making sort of 20% return on my money, which isn't too bad. I'd be pretty happy with that. So yeah, that's probably where I would focus. Sort of as strategy number 2 would be the BRR model and I would put it somewhere in the northeast because I think that's probably where it would perform the best. I know some people are investing in Wales at the moment, seeing Wales as a good area. Personally, I prefer the northeast, so that's probably where I would focus. So strategy number one, doing joint ventures with landowners or assisted sales. Strategy number two, doing bridging and sort of BRR model up in the northeast. And then strategy three is slightly different in that I'm not actually talking about doing my own deals. So strategy number three for me would be I would actually lend that 50 grand out to somebody else. And obviously nothing in this video is advice or anything like this. This is just purely what I would do if it was me. So let's say, for example, I've got 50 grand and someone comes to me and they say, I want to borrow that 50 grand off you. I'm going to give you first charge, second charge. I'm going to give you a personal guarantee or whatever it may be. And I'm going to give you 12% return on that money. So I'm going to look at that and I'm going to say, well, okay, for leaving 50 grand in with them for a year, I'm going to make circa 6 grand. Okay, that's not too bad. For a year, I don't have to do much. My money's secured on a first or second charge. I've got a personal guarantee. Okay, what are my risks? Well, the risk is that potentially that property deal falls apart. Okay, well, what leverage am I at? Have I got scope to then go and repossess that property? So if I'm a first charge holder, could I then take that deal over myself? Have I then got the sort of capacity, the capability to take that deal on and actually add it into the portfolio? How a lot of bridging lenders actually started, to be fair, was they built up portfolios through repossessing and sort of moving the properties into their own portfolio. Have I got the capability to do that? If not, could I sell it and make some of my money back? Yeah, probably. And then I want to understand, are they going to be paying the interest monthly? Is it rolled up to the end? If the interest is being paid monthly, on that, I'm getting circa, again, about 600 quid back a month. Let's call it just for argument's sake. So I'm getting £600 a month back. That's coming off the 50 grand every month that goes by. It's dropping down my total exposure every single month that goes by. Is that beneficial? Absolutely. If at the end of it, once I've had my sort of 6-7 grand, however much it is, back, I'm only actually out the door for, call it 43 grand, am I then going to roll it over for another year? Because the thing is, then you could roll it over for the next year. They still owe you 50 grand, obviously, because they're just paying interest on that, aren't they? So from that point of view, you start to look at it and you say, well, actually, what is my risk on this 50 grand? Because part of it's being paid down every month. I've got first or second charge. I've got a personal guarantee. Where am I worried? Now, if you put an extra zero on that, you say you're putting out 500 grand out the door, actually at that point, obviously that becomes slightly more painful and slightly more worrying. But it works for any amount of money to a degree in that every amount of money is going to hurt each of us slightly differently. 50 grand is going to hurt me more than a multi-millionaire who is risking 50 grand. People listening to this might say, well, actually 5 grand is going to hurt me in the same way as losing 50 grand. So in a later podcast, we're going to talk about actually how money is protected as an investor. And that's one of the biggest questions that comes from investors. But I think as long as you've got that first charge, second charge, personal guarantee, I think you'll be pretty well covered. And if they're borrowing within a limited company, you could also look to take a debenture as well. So I think that's sort of the three strategies that I would cover personally. If I had 50 grand to just sort of chuck about at the minute, I would say, yeah, joint ventures, BRR, or investing in someone else. And just to come back to that, investing in someone else, it has to be a trusted developer. The amount of times I've done these podcasts and I've said about how there are so many sharks out there at the moment. I mean, I can't actually emphasize that enough, how many sharks are out there at the moment. There are just some real arseholes out in property at the moment who will screw over anybody for a quid. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So it has to be a trusted developer or a trusted platform as well. I mean, that's the other thing. If you wanted to get into crowdfunding, that kind of thing, peer-to-peer platforms, you could invest in them and then they obviously do the due diligence and make the investments on your behalf. But it depends how you kind of want to operate it. I mean, obviously all these platforms come with their inherent risks as well. But yeah, that's where I would go for my three strategies if I had £50,000. So hopefully it's been helpful. A bit of food for thought, hopefully for people that are sort of getting started in property and maybe don't want to go and spend all of their money on property courses. and maybe actually want to put some money into property as opposed to courses. So hopefully there's a couple of ideas of a few things you can do pretty quickly. But hopefully it's been helpful. If it has, please do leave a review. Otherwise, I'll catch you on the next one.